everybody, welcome back. Tim here, Gamiviti, crispy morning here today, but thanks for joining me on this one. Gonna do an FJ40 rack install. So I've been wanting to do this one for a while. A couple things that are different on this one compared to the others. One, we only put 3 towers on to start instead of 4. We also have our new version of our rain gutter tower. So I'll show you a little bit about how those work. So yeah, let's just jump right into it. Should be pretty quick. So to start, like any rain gutter tower, I'm starting here with some assembly work. So bolting up, these are our extended height risers. So I'm using the lower of the 2 slots on those to give it the highest height position. It doesn't have to end up being as high as it goes, but it ends up being right about kind of right there. That gives us that gap we need across the roof. And then I've got some radiator overflow hose from a 2F. That works really well as my little kind of rack protector, I guess, or roof protector. So remember, just like the other ones, we've made these little sleeves that slide along the bottom edge of that. And so that's gonna sit in our rain gutter and just protect the surface so we don't scratch up a nice 40. Now again, this is the kind of the new generation of the tower, where here's our tower body. Remember the old clamp used to have this welded 3/8/16 all thread welded to it, and then it would slide up there and you put your washer and nut on top. The new version, we got rid of that, and that piece now still slides up, but now it's a separate bolt that goes up through both holes. So once they're on, they function exactly the same way. You still put your washers and nuts on top. The reason for the change is by taking that bolt out, it makes it a lot easier to add and remove this, because you can kind of wiggle it in a little bit better. And so this is for cases where you want to remove a rack from a vehicle and maybe stow it in a lift system or swap it from one truck to another. This allows you to keep the towers bolted to the rack, where you only have to lift it up a little bit. You can wiggle that clamp out. With this welded thing, that was really difficult to do, because you really had to lift it, and it just can't come out of there until it finally breaks free. And you ended up loosening these bolts up here that went to the rack, ended up doing the whole install all over again. So that was the reason for the change, was just a little bit more of an ease of use. So anyway, any questions about that, you know where to find me. Quick note on tower heights. I get asked this question quite a bit, so let me just illustrate here video style. We have 3 different tower riser options, right? So the 30/60 is the lowest, 45 is the next highest, and then the extended height 45, what we're using today. So in general, what we're using the 30/60s for is going to be a 60 series install. 80s, most often people want the lowest rack they can get on those. So that's what we're doing there. I got it set up here with a ruler. And that height, from basically measured from the rain gutter, about 5, I got some bolts in the way, 5.5 inches is what that says. And I could lower that actually a little bit more, and I get that down to about 4 3/4. So that's the range of that 30/60. I can do the same thing again here now. This is the 45-degree riser. So we're at 6.5 inches there. And then if I push that down, again, 5 3/4, so about an inch difference. We knew that. And then here's our extended height riser. Now these upper slots actually mimic the 45-degree. I just can't design a big old plate without putting a hole in it, really. So, but there you go. So we're at 8 inches here on the highest setting of that. And then if I push that down, it goes down to about 7. And that's what we usually use for the 40s. We also use these for the 43s, 45s, high roof 60s. Actually, on a high roof 60, it'll be this plus, believe it or not, a tiny little spacer washer between the plate and the rack. Those things are so high, but we can do it. So if you have a van, they work well for this, or you just need a high rack for some reason, those are your options. Now, let me show you how to measure that on your truck. Easiest way to do it is just lay a board across the roof and get your tape measure, come measure your gap. So I got about 5.5 inches from that board down to the rain gutter. But remember, you need to add a little bit of space because you don't want a rack laying flat on your roof. At least a 1/2 inch, if not an inch gap, in my opinion, is the minimum for any deflection. So you can get U-bolts, so you can get things underneath it. So there you go. That's how you can measure your truck to see which one of our towers works best for it. But we're not going to install the rack on this 40 today. That's coming, just not today. I'll swing this around though and show you what we got. This is our full Expo FJ40 rack, so raised rail all the way around. Should be pretty cool. And just waiting for the customer to show up. We'll back in here, we'll get this thing all buttoned up. So stay tuned, it's gonna be good. Okay. All right, here we go. So first step, put a little blanket or something on top to protect that roof. And then we're just gonna put a single tower right in the back, right above the crack between the two ambulance doors. And we'll bolt that on there and then we'll lift the rack back on. So I've got my tower on, it's leaning forward. I put that blanket between the tower and the roof so those bolts don't hit it. Next move is we're just gonna lift the rack up there. See if we'll get in that side. So we're up here on the ladder, and what I've done is I've just bolted this back tower right in the middle there using these innermost bolts. It's still a little bit loose, but that determines our position front to back. So our next move then is to install those very front corner towers, and we'll get this rack set up where it needs to be. And then our last move is going to be to install the other two per side. So we got both towers bolted up. Again, we're right in the middle of that plate, inside bolts. Then our next move is going to be to slide the clamp up into the tower and bolt it up. And then this rack will be on by 3 towers. Quick look from the other side. That's what that tower is looking like. And so our next move then is going to be put these up in position and bolt up the rear corner and the middle tower. All right, so we've got all the towers are now finger tight and bolted together. We like it, we like the position, and we're ready to tighten it down. So that's our next step. So when we tighten these, first two we want to tighten are these top bolts. You can kind of look at this inner edge and slide the tower so that those edges are essentially flush, and that'll just help ensure that you have it centered. I'm a little bit inside here, so I'm just gonna loosen this guy and slide that back. If you saw that, once I have that, I can hold that and then snug that with my other Allen wrench. There we go. So we're gonna tighten the top 2 bolts first, then we're gonna switch to the clamps. So once those top guys are tight, the next one I tighten is this clamp bolt. And again, you don't have to kill it, but as long as we're compressing that lock washer, that's tight enough. Now it doesn't matter as much on the 40 rack because these height adjustment bolts actually aren't doing much. They're just sitting there. As you can see, we're sitting at the very bottom of that slot. Well, you can't really see there, but I'll get you a view where you can. Let's look at the front one here. So there's really no travel going on. These are set at essentially the lowest that the bottom slots can go. So all the towers are at the same position. That's good, but just as practice, I do this one next, and these last, just so all the towers end up being at the same plane. So just like the 60 racks, 80 racks, etc. And there we go, everything's tight. Everything looks good. You can see the gap, you know, between the bottom of the rack and the rain gutter, probably 6.5 inches to the very top of the rack, right there to there, or more like 10.5. If you want to see if your garage clearance will fit the full Expo, your number is 10.5. If you want to fit a flat rack, your number is more like 7.5. But if you look across the middle, you can barely fit your fingers under there. So you really can't have a rack any lower than this. So there you go. Hopefully that's helpful to you. And that's it. Did a little bonus install of some traction ramps, action tracks on the side, but FJ40 rack install. Hope that was entertaining and fun for you. Thanks again for being with me today. Let me know what else you want to see, and I will see you on the next one.